Hey, this is Nick Millivoy.
And this is Jason Shadrick.
And this is the 100 Guitarists podcast, where each week we're telling you about one of the 100 guitar players that we think you should know about. And this week we are talking about the number one guitar player that I think you should know
That's right.
about.
This is
And
Nick's
Jason
magnum
may
opus.
or may not.
I don't
agree, and
disagree.
we'll
You definitely have other ones that are high on your list that I violently disagree with, but I can't really knock this one. This one I feel like is your most worthy pick.
I mean, this is the one.
The one.
The only. Neil Young.
Neil Young. All right, before we say any more about Neil, and we got a lot to get to, we want you to be able to get at us. You can email us at 100guitarists@premierguitar.com, or you can text or call us at 319-423-9734. You can also make sure to subscribe and like to us on whatever platform you're listening to or watching us on. And you can follow us on our socials where we put out calls for what guitar players we're going to be covering in the future. We did get a nice Zappa email.
We did get a nice Zappa email the other day that was very informative.
Very informative.
All right, and we want to thank Gibson for sponsoring this episode and give us the occasion to help Gibson announce that the Les Paul Studio family has a new member, and that's the Les Paul Studio Session. For years, the Les Paul Studio has been the choice of countless guitarists who appreciate the combination of the essential Les Paul features, humbucking pickups, glued-in set neck, and a mahogany body with a maple cap, all available at an accessible price. The new Les Paul Studio Session is an enhanced version of the classic Les Paul Studio with upgraded features and refinements based on customer feedback and player requests.
Yes, and it is a step up. And by step up, I mean it weighs less. It has ultra-modern weight-relieved mahogany body, which if you've rocked a custom, even a late 70s custom, that will take your shoulder off. But the mahogany neck has bound ebony fretboard with a modern contoured heel, and it has a 57 Classic pickup in the neck and a 57 Classic in the bridge. It's a slim taper profile and pure bypass switching, and it's available in a variety of gloss nitrocellulose lacquer finishes with matching trim and shipped in a soft shell case. So if you want to find out more about the new Gibson Les Paul Studio Session, head on over to Gibson.com. And thanks, Gibson, for sponsoring today's episode.
So a lot of people, their ultimate Les Paul players are, somebody like Jimmy Page or Dwayne Allman. I get it. Those are amazing, iconic tones. I love them so much also. But for me, the thing that convinces me that a Les Paul tone is so essential and so capable and versatile of so much expression and feeling is Neil Young's Les Paul playing. We'll talk about the details a little bit later. But, of course, Neil Young's Old Black is its own sort of beast that is not typical of a Les Paul. But to me, that sort of like talks about the versatility. It speaks to the Old Black speaks to the versatility of the platform that is the Gibson Les Paul.
Yes.
But before we talk about his sound, and I have a lot to say about his sound, I'm going to tell you right now, Jason, if there's one artist I could have an entire podcast about, I could do a Neil Young podcast. My premise would be, I would start with, this is my pitch. Go through his discography, every recording that is on the Neil Young Archives timeline. Just talk about the story behind, talk about what's cool about it. There's years of podcasts.
Yes.
Right, so, when we've reached all 100 guitar players on our list and we want to move on, I'm ready to do a Neil Young podcast with you.
What would the name of your Neil Young podcast be?
Oh, that's a great question. I never have a good answer for these sorts of things. I got to think fast.
There has to be a deep reference that only the heads would really pick up on. But while you're thinking about that, we need to tell where I'm coming from with Neil Young.
I'm curious because I don't totally know.
Because I don't hate his music. I do. I've learned some Neil Young tunes. I'm not an album by album fan. I've listened to Rust Never Sleeps, Harvest, that kind of stuff. Like I've hit the big ones, have not gone deep on him. I appreciate his love for train culture.
Yeah.
Because my father-in-law is also into trains.
Mm.
I appreciate that, and I like Old Black. I think Old Black is one of the coolest. I mean, they make kind of an unofficial. Gibson makes like an unofficial signature model, I believe. Did you know
Is that
about
right?
this?
No.
Okay, this is real time here. I'm gonna send this to you. So this is like an unofficial signature model, which I think we should revisit when we talk about Old Black in more depth.
I'm going to push back on that a little bit.
Well, because here, listen to the first. Clearly inspired by the Old Black 6-string wielded by a prolific Canadian American rocker. Like that's the first line of the copy.
Yes.
I mean, this is.
I do see that, but there's a few things. I mean, all right, it's got the Bigsby. It has the
And this is new.
It has the P90.
This is
It
new.
doesn't
I
have
did
a
not
mini
know about
humbucker.
this. No, it's a P90. It's a black. It's a 56 Les Paul standard with a Bigsby, and P90 in the neck and humbucker in the bridge. So it's, like I said, it's unofficial. I don't think anybody's trying to do this. But what I noticed, now we're looking at Sweetwater here. Are you seeing the guitar gallery at the top of the page there? Right where it lists 5 of them.
Yes.
Do you notice that one of them has different colored knobs? At least what I'm looking at. Do you see that too?
No, I don't see that. I see
Yeah.
black knobs.
For all 5 of them?
Yeah. Oh,
Huh.
no, there it is. I was in the wrong spot. Yes. That's weird. But the thing is, they're saying it's a 56. Old Black is a 53.
I'm saying it's unofficial. This isn't like a part by part recreation. But I tell you what, if you walk into a gig and somebody on stage is playing that, you're gonna be like, well, they spent some time with the horse.
No, absolutely. If
You know?
I were buying a new Gibson Les Paul, and I'll tell you right now, I don't own a Les Paul, and the reason I don't own a Les Paul is because I feel like it would ruin me. I don't feel like I'm capable of owning a Les Paul because of how much. If I could get that close to that sound, I don't think I would do anything else. I don't think I'm responsible enough to make other music. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you'd get over it.
I would eventually get over it, but I don't know. So, I bought this my Tweed Deluxe is behind me. That's a 49. That's a 5A3, not a 5E3. Neil's is a 59. And I play it with my Telly, my SG. I mean, I play it with everything that I have. But I bought it inspired by Neil Young. It was the Tweed Deluxe that I could afford, and it's still hard for me not to just crank it all the way up and play A minor and E minor chords.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
Like that's what I want to do on that amp. So if I had a Les Paul, I'd be all in on it, and I don't know. There was so there's a story, and I've never I don't really know, like, this isn't a fact-checked thing. This is just an experience that if maybe 6 years ago, something like that, 7 years ago, the store TR Crandall in New York posted a picture of a Les Paul that looked like Old Black. It wasn't black, but it otherwise was set up very similarly to Old Black. And the story was that it was set up by Larry Craig to do that setup, and that there are 3 of them. One is Old Black, one is Daniel Lanois' Les Paul, which we will not be covering Daniel Lanois on this podcast, but he is also one of my favorites. So this is huge. And then there's this 3rd one. And so TR Crandall posted it. I have no business buying that guitar. I cannot afford that guitar. I would have to sell everything. I was not in the market, but I have a friend who does have business, maybe potentially, and he was like, for fun, can you call? He lives in Europe. Like, absolutely. Like, I want a reason to call and talk about this guitar. And I called the store, and they're like, it's gone, it's already sold. And I was like, damn.
I think we've talked about this before.
We did. So
Yeah.
that's Jason Isbell's Les Paul that he has
Yep.
played. That has appeared in his rig rundown. He has that Les Paul. But to me, that's the guitar to have. Like that one, I just, I was never close to buying it, but I was close to, being the middleman for my friend in Italy who didn't have a chance to call and was curious about buying it and collects Les Pauls and stuff. But
Did I ever tell you I did a video with Larry Craig?
you did tell me you did a video.
I did,
with Larry
yeah.
Craig. Yeah. Was
It
that
was-
a Magnetone video, right?
It was a magnet, yeah, and it was like I had no idea. Magnetone was on the schedule. I roll up to the
You
booth,
show up, there he is.
and honestly, I probably wouldn't have recognized him. You know what I mean?
But he said, "Hi, I'm Larry Craig."
Yeah. I mean, at NAMM, everybody has their.
Yeah.
And I looked down. I was like, oh, yeah. I met. It's funny. Like
cool.
several famous techs.
That would feel pretty big to me.
And I wish you could have been there. You could have asked. He probably would have answered whatever questions you wanted, man.
I would have had to.
I did not know enough about the inner workings to ask him any good questions, but yeah, he couldn't have been cooler.
All right, so I want to talk about Neil's playing, and for me, what is so special about Neil's playing?
Yes,
and
because you're going to walk me through this. You're going to walk me through this, so that way, after I get done with this pod, much like our listeners, I will go through and be like, "Hey, maybe that Reactor record from 1981 is not so bad." Foreshadowing.
I am an unfortunate. I am not maybe the greatest source for this totally because as I get older, I think that probably the best person to convince you on something is somebody with like a little bit of skepticism. Like I feel as though, we've done our Dead episode. I feel like I'm a good person for somebody who's not into the Dead. And then they're like, is there something I should like? I'm like, I actually don't like a lot of Dead either, but there's some stuff I really like. I have skepticism about it. And I think that makes me a reliable source because I can be skeptical. As I get older, I'm becoming less and less skeptical of things in Neil's catalog. What I mean is, Neil is known for having like a very wide output of lots of different styles.
Yeah.
And, there was a point in my life where I didn't like his rockabilly record, and that point is now long ago.
And which record are you referring to? Hold on. Which record, for those not in the know, which one are you talking about?
Everybody's Rocking.
Everybody's Rocking from what year? What year era are we talking?
I'm going to say that's 83, but off the top of my head.
Perfect. You nailed it. Yeah, I got it right here. Fact checked you right in the moment. 83.
I didn't want to overly prepare for this episode because it would be 3 hours long. Okay, so to speak to that point, there's a development that happened and that continues to happen over the course of Neil's entire career, which is so long, right?
Yes.
His career is so long. And he was a cool guitar player who is also a great songwriter who was able to encapsulate emotions and feelings in the most simple terms. And I think that's always been his biggest strength as a songwriter, is to be able to keep it simple, but to encapsulate emotion, and to also his voice is very vulnerable. He has a very vulnerable style as singer and as songwriter. As a guitar player, he started out as a cool guitar player. Down by the River, that solo is just known for how simple it is, right? Like that's known. That's a known thing. His riffs are cool. Cinnamon Girl is an awesome riff. People who aren't big Neil Young fans sometimes get stuck in that period because that's when his biggest hits happened, right? Sure. He continued to have hits. Up through the 90s, he was having radio rock hits. And I'm thinking of like Rockin' in the Free World there. But his most prominent work happens so early in his career. But at that time, as a player, he was also relying a lot on other people. So early Crazy Horse, and we're talking Down by the River, for example, he's got Danny Whitten also playing guitar in the band. Harvest has just like this amazing all-star band. Neil's guitar playing is amazing on Harvest, but he's mostly playing acoustic and playing rhythm guitar. And that tends to be the stuff that people know. Hey, hey, my. Everybody knows hey, hey, my, right? But Neil's playing more than a lot of other guitar players that just in general, but that we're speaking about on here. Like a lot of people have, Jimmy Page, for example. Let's just say Jimmy Page, right? Like his guitar playing developed early, and what we know the best is, and what his greatest work, what is accepted as his greatest playing, is from like when he was in his 20s, basically, right? For Neil, I would argue that he was the arc is so long, and that he didn't fully develop his voice until later. So we know his biggest hits because his songwriting voice was so developed, and his songwriting was so amazing and so great that it overshadowed his playing for a long time. But it's like my favorite albums of songs, yeah, they're from the 70s. Zuma is probably my favorite album, and that's got Cortez on there, Danger Bird, big guitar songs, and those are great recordings. But Neil's still like becoming Neil Young on those records.
Yeah.
So we get to the 80s, and Neil famously did a whole bunch of stuff in the 80s, a whole bunch of different styles. He was doing, he was hanging out with Devo and got inspired to make the album Trans. Reactor, which we mentioned earlier, is totally weird. Totally, a lot of people don't like that album. A lot of people don't like Landing on Water with that produced by Nico Bolas with Steve Jordan on drums. I love that album. Lots of synths and stuff like that. He was still finding all sorts of things he could get into. And, I could keep going. There's country stuff, blues stuff. But like, to me, that also distracts from his guitar playing. It wasn't really until the late 80s going into the 90s where Neil's guitar became the thing that's up front.
Like Ragged Glory era?
Ragged Glory especially. That's the album where now Neil's guitar is so developed. And again, it's not saying that it's not developed. Like Rust Never Sleeps, Live Rust, those are amazing guitar albums. Neil's sound is so cool on those, but everybody knows those. The point I want to make is just that the 90s is when the guitar thing really comes to full fruition. Yeah. And that's where I find the best guitar playing. And so if you're not a dedicated fan if you're not listening to Ragged Glory, if you're not listening to Weld, if you're not listening to Broken Arrow, those records are where the guitar is right up front. And you're going to miss that thing that's so special about his playing and how it develops sonically, how it developed his vocabulary. And the vocabulary that is most important to me is that his playing sort of met the idea of that sort of like simplicity and vulnerability of his songwriting. He found it, but then with this like really unique, with it like a strikingly unique tone that only sounds like Neil Young, but is so complex and so rich.
Yeah.
So have you spent time with any of those albums?
Not a lot of them, but like I know Harvest, Gold Rush, Rust Never Sleeps.
Those are even amazing song albums.
Even
with
Tonight's
great
the
guitar
Night.
playing.
But I remember the first thing that connected me in terms of Neil Young. You're gonna love this. I have two jam band moments that really connected me.
Can I guess?
Sure.
Farm Aid.
No.
Oh, okay.
One was when, and this happened a bunch. It's probably the Central Park concert when Warren Haynes played Cortez with Dave Matthews Band.
Oh, okay.
That was one. The other one was the first time I saw Fish, and they opened with, and this could be the only time they played that song. Come on, baby, let's go downtown.
Oh, I've heard them do that before. I don't know if it was that recording or if,
yeah. It was a cold December in Chicago at the Allstate Arena. And they opened, and our seats were behind the stage, and they played this song, and I'm like, what is this song? This is a cool song. And I don't think they've played it very much, if ever, after that. But went
That's
back.
That's a good one for Fish
looked
too.
Up,
they also do Albuquerque.
Yep.
And
I've heard that.
They do a nice Albuquerque.
And of course, I mean, it's amazing how how you kind of, just like a lot of bands, like there are bands that are turning people onto Neil Young just from covering his tunes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm really interested in all the after just hearing you talk there and all the weird stuff
The
because
weird stuff is really good.
and I think
And
I'm
people
just
skip by
interested.
it.
I'm just interested in just like I want to see how weird Neil can get because I've heard his
He
singer
can get
songwriter
really
stuff
weird.
and it's super great. And I've heard his all right, earmuff him, his jam band rock stuff.
They're a jam band.
Crazy Horse is a jam
I'll
band.
give you that. Yeah.
All right.
They're my favorite jam
Your
band.
favorite jam band of all time, Crazy Horse. I've heard that stuff. I know what that sounds like, right? Like when you said this rockabilly record, I'm like, wait, what? Like, come on, everybody's rocking with the Shocking Pinks.
Yep. Cool record. A lot of people don't like it. A lot of people are gonna hear me say that and be like, "That's just wrong." No, it is a totally cool record. It's Neil Young making rockabilly. So like, I want to hear Neil Young play every style.
Is this kind of like Jeff Beck's?
No. Jeff. I mean, Jeff Beck's is like way more polished and like, Jeff
does it
Beck
sound like
very
Neil Young
guy.
playing rock, sitting on?
It sounds like Neil Young
band?
playing rockabilly. So, Neil Young playing electronic music sounds like
that's not as interesting to me.
It doesn't sound like Devo. It doesn't sound like Kraftwerk. It still sounds like a Neil Young. He's singing through a vocoder. Sounds like Neil Young. Like you still hear Neil Young in the songs because that's how much of a sonic signature he has on his stuff. Neil Young playing country music. I mean, we've heard that Harvest is that, right?
Right.
What else? His blues record I think is really cool. I think that a lot of people
and that's which one?
Neil stuff with the blue notes.
You're talking This Note's for You?
This Note's for You is the record. The live version is a little bit better. It came out a few years ago, an archival thing called Live at the Blue Note Cafe. But yeah, This Note's for You. Those songs, they're still Neil Young songs. They're just bluesy and with horns and stuff.
Yeah.
And This Note's for You is like a play on a beer commercial. Okay, that's
pretty
weird.
Yeah, as far as modern stuff, like the album he did with Booker T and the MGs, I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Are You Passionate?
People don't talk about that because they don't like the song Let's Roll, but that's a great record.
Yeah. I thought that was cool. And then I know since I've been at Premier Guitar and we've tried dozens of times to talk to Neil, I remember the Monsanto years being one because was that the first one he did with Lucas and Promise of the Real?
Left me wanting a little bit more.
I'm not, but I thought musically it was cool.
The playing is cool, the vibe is cool. It's just the lyrics are not my thing.
No. Colorado, I thought was a cool record.
Colorado. I've heard.
Is that the one they made Is that the one they made the documentary about?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. That's when they were in the barn.
No, that's Barn.
That's Barn. Okay, but wasn't the barn in Colorado?
Yeah, I think it's in Colorado.
Okay, very confusing marketing here, Neil. We gotta.
Neil's not worried about that.
No, but the documentary.
So the documentary, looked at the Neil Young archive, which I love, you'll know that being confusing is not something he doesn't care. No, over.
I get it. But
have you ever heard Lenoise while we're here talking about his weird?
Is
record?
That's the Daniel Lanois? That's the one.
Yeah.
Yes.
That record, I'll say. Okay, so the Neil Young Dead Man soundtrack, the soundtrack for Jim Jarmusch's Dead Man movie.
Yeah.
Instrumental Neil Young guitar album. Have you heard that one?
No.
That is I love that movie so much, and a part of it is because of Neil, but I'm a Jim Jarmusch fan. So this is just like a worlds colliding. In a good way, not in a George Costanza way. Dead Man is amazing. And it's Neil just improvising with the film, and there is no better musician to score that picture than Neil and his guitar. And it's just it's a vibe thing. The sound is so great, and the theme itself that he plays throughout the movie is it's a really cool, well-written theme that is just like I love playing that too. When the noise came out.
Okay, for Dead Man, so that's just him on guitar?
It's just him on guitar vibing. Yeah.
No band.
No.
Okay.
And there's video of him in the room with like this, he's got it going, the picture up there, and he's doing this, bobbing around, doing his thing. It's so cool. And like he makes the electric guitar sound like it's like 100 years old. You know, like it's like that movie takes place vaguely in the 19th century, and the electric guitar sounds period appropriate, like how
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't even make sense, and that's just the deal. That's how that sounds to me. When Lanois came out, I thought that it was going to be like Dead Man again with Lanois sort of thing. It's a different thing. It's a totally
Mm-hmm.
different thing. I know a lot of people think this way. I was sort of like disappointed when it first came out. I didn't love it. Listened a couple times and didn't come back to it for a few years. I have since come back. It is now among my top Neil Young albums.
Mm.
It's like now that I can appreciate it for what it is and not for what I thought it was going to be. I've listened to that more than the Dead Man soundtrack at this point. Like, even though that's what I wanted it to be, it's a really cool record, and it's Neil and Daniel Lanois like recorded at Lanois' house, only under the full moon, and it's just like Neil playing guitar and singing live, and then they like do Lanois treatments to it. So awesome.
I remember seeing
recommend that one,
video.
but a weird record.
I remember seeing they put out videos
Mhm.
of him doing that. I remember seeing those. And I thought they were very interesting. And he's playing. Was it a Gretsch White Falcon?
There's probably some White Falcon in there, some
yeah.
Old Black in there. Yeah.
Dig.
I want to go back to the 90s though. So we're
Okay.
talking about weird Neil records, but for me, this isn't a weird Neil record, but for me, it's kind of a weird one. My first Neil Young record that I ever bought was from BMG Music Club. I got the Weld album. Okay. Weld is a live album from the Ragged Glory tour.
Mm-hmm.
And that
Crazy
was like
Horse,
a tour that like,
right?
yeah, Crazy Horse. And that is, and to me, Crazy Horse is like, there's a lot of great ways to see Neil. I've seen him 4 times, twice have been with Crazy Horse. They've all been great. But Crazy Horse that's the unit that like is the most, that's the Ragged unit.
Mm-hmm.
Weld is a weird first one because that tour, it's like he like Sonic Youth were opening for that tour, and just like he was getting stoked to just like do his thing and be noisy and get crazy. If you look at the cover, see if you can pull up the cover.
Yep.
To Weld. I didn't know that those were fake amps when I was 13. So to me, Neil Young just had he was the only person in the world that had these giant amps. Not just that he had big amps, but he had giant amps, right? They're like
15, 20 feet tall.
I didn't know that this was like a fake backdrop.
Oh, gosh.
So to me as a kid, wow, Neil plays these crazy amps and the guitar sounds like that. And to me, that is the loudest album cover. Because it's like they look like they're getting blown away by these giant amps, right?
Well, I'm just kind of like scanning the wiki for this record, and it said Young has stated that he permanently damaged his hearing while mixing the record.
Yes, he
not
famously
performing it,
mixed this record extremely loud. The roadies, they talk about this in the book Shaky. The roadies were like didn't want to walk in front of his amps when they were sound checking, or if they had to come out on stage. Nobody wanted to walk in front of his amps because they were so loud. And so by the end of the tour, he developed hyperacusis, and then famously mixed it extremely loud and was mixing it. There's an anecdote, and I'm almost certain it's from this record. He was mixing it with one set of speakers coming from one barn and one coming from like another building on his property, and he would like listen from the middle of this pond on his boat and then be like, more barn. Like, just, insane feats of volume, like actually just like crazy unhealthy feats of volume were performed on that record. Like that, I think you could get into if you listen to that.
Yeah.
And just hear, that's a crazy sounding record. And then there's an outtakes album called Arc that is just outtakes from Like a Hurricane put together as a sonic collage, and it's just like feedback and noise. It's like a half an hour of feedback and noise from that. Also super cool. It sounds like Sun, like the band Sun and Earth before either of those bands existed. That's like Neil was like, yeah, let's make a feedback
real noise record.
Yeah.
Yeah. See,
So-
that's incredible. Like, I almost love the stories behind these
Mhm.
and the anecdotes. Like, I don't think I'm gonna dig Arc. I don't think that's for me.
I don't think sonically it's
I'm
yours,
glad
but I think the
I'm glad it
story is
exists. You know, I'm glad it's out there. All that, but I'm not gonna be driving to work one day and be like, you know what, I could really, you know, you know, what my ears need right now 35 minutes of him tuning or whatever. Weld. I mean, hell of a set list on Weld.
Yeah.
I mean, you're hitting you get the hits, you get some Dylan.
Yep. That Blowing in the Wind is really good.
You know, a 14-minute Like a Hurricane.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're a jam band. I'm trying to remind you of
pretty
that.
noisy.
As much. Well, jam band doesn't need to be melodic.
No,
not at all. So, okay, so live, we've talked about it. Let's listen to a call now. We got a call we need to talk about.
So Ryan McDermott, he is a really great experimental guitar player I know from TC. It was nice to see that he called in. Let's see what Ryan has to say.
Hey, this is Ryan McDermott, noisemaker down here in the Maryland and DC region. Great to talk to you, Nick and Jason. Just wanted to say, you know, as someone more on the avant-garde or experimental end of things, you might think, what does Neil Young have for you? But honestly, I think it's a pretty short walk to go from someone like Neil Young to someone like Sonny Chirac. You know, it may not have been in either of their brains, but there is, you know, deep connections there. I mean, I listened to the solos on,
players.
You know, things like Cortez the Killer, and it's so out there, it's so boundary pushing, even if it's what people might call simple, you know. And I think that kind of gravity that he has in his playing is you know, borne out by the fact that so many of our favorite guitar players look at Neil Young solos and say, like, man, like, I wish I could do that, right? And these are guitar players who are, by all accounts, more technically proficient than someone like Neil Young, but still completely ensorcelled by the way he plays. And for me, it's all about the fact that he really pushed the boundaries of what it meant to play a guitar solo, especially in an era when, you know, you had, whether it was the late 60s, the 70s, the 80s, where you had people just absolutely shredding up and down the neck. And I love that too. You know, I think Eddie Van Halen is an experimental guitar player in that sense in a lot of ways too. But Neil Young, man, I can say that despite all the non-idiomatic, crazy stuff that I enjoy, Neil Young, he's right there sitting next to Derek Bailey and Sonny Chirac and all those people for me. So anyway, great talking. Bye.
I could not agree more.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, that's just another part of like the complexity of Neil, is that he's written some of the biggest radio rock hits of all time.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and because his guitar thing developed later, it's like he was able to like really strike out with that and then also be this super weirdo guitar player. You know, I remember, okay, so on the Psychedelic Pill tour, that's a great album. I think that's 2000. I want to say that came out in 2012, and then the tour was 13. But again, I don't have it in front of me. You might have it in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
First, they did the Americana album. Nobody talks about the Americana album. That's a cover of songs like Tom Dooley and Oh Susanna, Crazy Horse, playing like those songs. And because of that, I feel like people don't like. I feel like when it came out, it was like, oh, weird. Neil. Oh, there's Neil doing his weird thing again.
That's not that weird. I mean, having him play this line, Woody Guthrie tunes, that doesn't mean
Woody Guthrie tunes. No, but like Oh Susanna, I feel like sort of like turn people off to it. That's
Clementine.
An excellent Clementine.
Yeah,
excellent album. He rewrites them. They're not the same melodies that you know. And he's like recontextualizing them, and I think some of them have extra verses and stuff like that. That's a totally killer record. And then shortly after, they did the Psychedelic Pill album.
Mm-hmm.
And when they did the tour for that, I saw them here at the Wells Fargo Center in Philly. And, that's where the Flyers and the Sixers play. That's a huge arena. And by the time they're doing that, the song Walk Like a Giant, especially, they're doing lots of long jams. And then, as Crazy Horse will do. But the song Walk Like a Giant would dissolve into this this total just stomping around, feedback, like detuning their guitars and stuff like that, and just feedback jams, and again sounding like the band Sun and Earth, but in an arena. And there's like people there who are there to see down by the river, and they're down to and we can all, I am there to see that stuff too. Those are all, I want to see the whole thing, but it's like there's people go to a Neil concert to hear those songs, and then they get this. And because Neil is just so, that's just so a part of who he is. He's the only person that can do that. They can do 30 minutes of guitar feedback in an arena, and people are down. People are paying for the tickets. So yeah, that's such an interesting thing. I want to say one thing about like all this talk about how noisy and experimental he is. His acoustic playing is also such a big part of the Neil Young story.
Yeah, I had a student recently ask me to teach him. Let me see here, something off heart. Oh, Needle and Damage Done.
Mm-hmm.
And
great song.
It's a great song, and just really, because this particular student is a real, like, I don't want to stay like I could say, oh yeah, it's A minor G F C is basically the song, right? But he really wanted to get into the nuts and bolts of how, right? And so I dug up a transcription of it, and I started really kind of analyzing how his acoustic, because it's basically he's just playing rhythm through the whole thing. There isn't like a solo or anything like that. And like his acoustic strumming style was like, it kind of struck me as like, it's a little like, because when I'm trying to emulate it, even as the teacher, I was like, oh, that's a little more like, of course we could all just play the chords and sing the song and get through the song, and everybody's like, oh yeah, you play the song. But like to really get inside how he's strumming and really how he was thinking about a chord progression, even in a fairly simple song like that gave me a new appreciation for his acoustic playing. And then you listen to Old Man. That's some great acoustic playing on there.
And especially in the 70s, especially, you listen to like solo performance. He was doing a lot of acoustic solo performances, and there's concerts officially released where you can really, hear him unaccompanied on acoustic. And it's so his rhythmic thing. And that's, I was saying before that his guitar voice like developed. Like, I'm really talking about his lead voice there.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that was developed first was his rhythm playing, and specifically his acoustic rhythm playing, where he could be really percussive. And I always think of him as like, he's like a whole guitar strummer.
Yeah.
Like, meaning he's playing each set, it's like the strings, maybe sometimes he's breaking the strings up into two parts. And I think of it like a piano, left hand, right hand, right? And he's playing the bass strings in a different way than he's playing the top strings. And then sometimes he's breaking it into three parts, and there's some middle things in there too, that he's doing some hammer-ons and stuff like that, and articulating some things over just an E minor chord. And it's like he can play an E minor chord so many different ways. For me, when I do my acoustic Neil Young imitation...
One second.
I'm about to play E minor.
When I'm doing my Neil Young acoustic imitation, the way you do that is you do like a 3-3-2 pattern, just like dun, 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 right on like an E minor, and just break it up with some hammer-ons and go between the bass and and it's like, there it is. There's instant fake Neil Young.
There it is.
But it's always he improvises with that. He opens up so much on that. The album Hitchhiker, which is like an archival release that came out, that has really great examples of this.
Okay. I want to ask you a question about the archival stuff, because I feel like you're the type of Neil Young fan that more is better. More is more better.
I
'cause
probably am.
Anything he puts out, you're gonna at least listen to, right?
I'm gonna listen to it at least once.
He's put out so much stuff.
There's
Crazy
probably some
Horse.
stuff I still haven't heard that I just like don't
Sure.
remember not hearing.
But yeah, but it's not, you haven't like actively avoided.
No. I'm gonna listen to.
So
I'm gonna give anything a shot.
what's, and also it seems like every 6 months it's like, especially recently, it's like, oh, we're putting out a new Neil Young record that nobody's ever heard that was recorded in 1974. Great. I'm glad he has a wealthy archive of stuff to release. All well and good.
Yeah.
What would you like to see released that you've always wanted to hear?
That is really tough because it's all been released. It's all
Okay, that's
it's all
my
being
question.
released. Well, I do have an answer to that, but
Okay.
it's like, I was hopeful that there were like some extra tracks from Trans. I want to hear some of that stuff. I don't think they are. They did the archives from that period recently, and I don't think there's
That's it?
I think he just recorded the songs that fit that album. And that stuff is also produced. It's like that's probably all they finished.
Mhm.
What would I like to hear? So there was an album called, again, and this will speak to that too. There was a known Crazy Horse lost, quote unquote, not lost, but unreleased recording, called Toast, that was recorded around, I forget off the top of my head, I want to say late 90s, early 2000s. And then Neil went in a different direction, didn't release the album.
Mhm.
And to me, I was like, all right, it probably, maybe it's less good. Neil is not the best, he's not the best person to assess what is good and not good in his catalog.
So are you saying Toast?
So
That's
Toast
out.
wasn't, Toast came out now,
Yeah.
I think like 3 years ago.
Yeah. Okay.
And because there's so much stuff coming out, I feel like a lot of people haven't talked about Toast, but I got that and was like, yeah, this is another part of that period, this really hot period for Crazy Horse. This is another part of that story that I knew wasn't out there, and I sort of assumed might, like, I was excited about it, but I was like, tempered my expectations. It was better than I imagined. I think Toast is great. So it's like that came out, and I really wanted that to come out. There's not a lot left that I know of that I want to hear come out, except there is this in the mid 90s, Neil recorded a video called Complex Sessions that Jonathan Demme produced. It's a Crazy Horse thing, and you can find it. It does exist, but there's no you can't. It's not available. I think the only place I know to find it, and I haven't checked, it does change what's available. It was on Neil Young Archives. If it's not there, I think it doesn't exist, and I would like to see that come out. It's just a in the studio live session that Jonathan Demme filmed, but it's really good. They're playing, I think it's, if I remember correctly, it's Stuff Off Sleeps with Angels, which is such a great undervalued record. And it just sounds like them in a room in a different way than in front of a live audience. It feels real homey. So I would like to see Complex Sessions come out, but
Dick, that's a good one.
Yeah.
See, I'm just enough of a fan of Neil Young that it would be fun, because he has so many records and live stuff. It would be fun to go album by album and really listen.
Yeah, dude.
To each one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dude. Listen to Ragged. Have you spent time with Ragged Glory?
Not a lot. I've heard it, but I haven't.
You don't have to listen to every album. You don't just listen to Ragged Glory. That is also the sound of those guys, the sound of Crazy Horse just doing their thing.
There better be a jam on here. If there's not a song over 10 minutes, I'm
every song
okay,
is
good.
A jam.
Yeah. No, not on this. No, I'm looking at the track listing. 2 minutes 57 seconds. That's not a jam.
Wait,
White Line.
White Line's only 2 minutes and 57 seconds.
Yep.
Oh, well, I didn't.
Farmer John 4:14. Mansion on the Hill 4:48. Days that used to be 3:42. Luckily, you have Love to Burn and Love and Only Love, because those are 10 plus.
What's Country Home? Country Home's
7 minutes 5 seconds.
Yeah. So all right,
that's borderline jam.
In the top, could be off the top of my head, they're all long, but also I've listened to a lot of live versions of those songs that open.
Yeah, I mean, Country Home could just have a wordy
so
verse.
No, Country Home is a jam, man. Country Home is really
All right.
good.
So we've talked about a million different records here as we kind of wrap
Yes.
up. If you were to pick 3 or 4 guitar records, which I'm sure you've mentioned before, for the guitar heads in the audience, real hardcore Neil Young guitar records, what would they be?
Okay. The real hardcore Neil Young guitar records. I'm gonna go. I don't want them to be too much the same.
Ragged Glory?
I was thinking between Ragged Glory and Weld, because Weld is my first, but
Or both?
I think Ragged Glory is that's the essential one. Ragged Glory. This is such a Ragged Glory, the soundtrack for Year of the Horse, which is a live documentary film produced
I thought
by
you
Jim
were going to
Jarmusch.
go that Jim Jarmusch one.
Well, this is also made by Jim Jarmusch. And then I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking, yeah, maybe Dead Man. I mean, guitar people should hear Dead Man. So that's 3 90s records. And I think that's that's for guitar. That's the hot period. Yeah,
All
let's
right.
do that.
Those 3?
Print
Got
it.
All right. Last thing. Give me 5 minutes
Last
on
thing.
Yeah. You got more?
I got an hour about gear to talk about. No, I'm kidding. We do.
But here we go. We talked
gear
about
stuff
Old
is
Black
out on the internet.
Yes.
Go find the gear stuff. I'm not going to be able to contain myself talking about Old Black, talking about his Tweed Deluxe, talking about the Whizzer.
That's what I said. I need 2 minutes on the Whizzer.
The Whizzer's super simple. I don't even need 2 minutes. The Whizzer is a unit that Neil had made by his amp tech that controls the knobs on his Tweed Deluxe, because those amps are so rad that the combination of the way the knobs interact affects the tone so much. So that affects that, and he has a pretty simple but unique effect setup, and then the Whizzer to control how his knobs are set, so you can just step on them. It's this big red metal, archaic looking thing.
If he just got himself Axe Effects,
Don't.
that he wouldn't need the Whizzer. Because they're in. Because see, the amps are in there. He could profile the real amps and keep them in this easy box that it would even say things on it, so he knows what preset he's using.
You know what you're saying. Here's what I'll say about, we've had some conversations, Jason, where and I don't disagree. I'm with you. I like modeling technology has gone so far that I really am like, I can buy into it. I haven't gone down that route, but yeah, it makes things easier and all this stuff. But I still have these old things behind me, right? But when I saw Crazy Horse this summer, and this was like a gift, I thought I was never going to see Crazy Horse again. Those guys are really old and hadn't been doing anything for a few years. And they announced this tour. It's a pretty short turnaround, and I get to see them. They were opening their shows with Cortez the Killer. And I still remember the first 2-3 minutes, and they're just E minor, D, and A minor, and just the sound of his guitar rig, of Neil's guitar rig, the sound of him just playing those chords. It was like the whole band sounded like a creaky pirate ship. The time was a little weird, and they didn't even end the tour. Neil ended up being unsatisfied with that part of it. He thought that maybe time was up. So I saw one of the last Crazy Horse shows that will probably ever happen. But it's I was into it. I had just seen the Stones, and the Stones sounded improbably tight. Not really. They should sound tight, right? But the Stones they're aging in one way. They were aging in this way where they're Mick Jagger's I'm 80 years old. Watch this, and runs down the stage in the middle. Runs for 300 feet or something. You're like, oh my God, how does he do that? Crazy Horse was the opposite. They're just like, it's very creaky. It sounded, and it's like I said about Dead Man, the music sounded 100 years old. It just sounded so old, and his guitar tone just sounded aged.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, that is the deepest E minor chord I've ever heard. Like, that is sonically, there was so much stuff in just like boom, just like hitting a low E, and that was like, yeah, there's something else going on here. These old tubes and these old wires talking to each other, and I just thought it was the coolest thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we did it. We got through the
episode 1 of our Neil Young trajectory.
Episode
All right.
1 of the Neil Young character.
Write in. Tell us how much you love talking about Neil. Send in your Neil Young questions. Send in your Neil Young. If you send us enough calls, Jason's going to have to want to do another episode, and
That's true.
That's going to make him have to listen to Ragged Glory.
Well, I'll listen to regular anyway.
Listen to
So. All right. Well, get at us. Let us know your thoughts on Neil Young. 100Guitarists at premierguitar.com, or you can call or text us at 319-423-9734.
And thank you again to Gibson and the Les Paul Studio Session for sponsoring this episode. And thank you to anybody who stuck it out this far listening to me talk. Tell Jason why he should listen to Neil Young make noise on his guitar.
There we go. All right. We'll see y'all next week.
See you next week.